Good morning. My name is Heather Long, and I'm with the ARC of San Antonio's Family Support Services program. And I want to welcome you to our first webinar in a series of 4 presentations that we have coming up titled Special Education 101. And for these sessions, we have some leading educational advocates and consultants who are going to bring us a wealth of their knowledge. Some of the topics include advocacy, transition, autism specific supports. And this wouldn't be possible without the generous support of the Harvey E. Nashum Charitable Foundation and the Mays Family Foundation. So let me take a few moments just for some basic housekeeping. We are muting everyone's microphones and turning off the videos for this webinar. At the end of the webinar, we'll have time for presentation questions. So if you have any questions, go ahead and put those in the chat or in the Q&A, and I will monitor those. And at the end of our presentation, we will talk about the questions. We're recording the session to make it available for any family that wasn't able to make it to the live session. So just a reminder to please not disclose any personal information either in the chat or the Q&A section so we can adhere to HIPAA standards. Following the presentation, we'll provide the link for the recording and the PowerPoint that's presented today. So I want to welcome our presenter, Girasol is with the Special Education Advocate. She's a Special Education Advocate and Trainer with the Brighton program, Special Education Support Services. She's been working as an advocate for families for over 20 years. She's the parent of 5 children, many of whom have utilized or are utilizing special education services. So she brings not only her professional experience, but also her personal experience, particularly now with the pandemic and all the experiences she's experiencing with being able to see from the back end of what's going on. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Girasol, and we'll be back in a few moments. We'll be back at the end with questions. So make sure you put any of your questions in the chat or in the Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here and to be able to present this information for everybody. And like you said, I'm with Brighton Center. I am a special education advocate and trainer, and I am so excited to share. In a way, it's going to be a very quick presentation. It's not the entire special education process and in detail, but it's going to be sufficient, to be able to know and guide you to where you need to go if you need some supports. So we start off today really quick with what is IDEA. And IDEA is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act that was passed back in 1975. And what this means is it is the law that requires schools to provide special education and related supports and services to any student who may have a disability and may need some of these services. But IDEA is such a huge information to kind of give you in a little snippet. All I want you to take away from today is that it is designed to meet the child or the student's unique needs and prepare them for their education, further education, employment, and for independent living. With that in mind, anything involved in the IEP is going to be in these areas. We want to make sure that the education part is there, that we are setting them up for employment purposes, and also what's going to happen when they graduate, and we want them to be prepared for the independent living portion. Starting off with the RTI process. The RTI is a response to intervention that is general education. Everybody starts in general education, and it is a tier process. There's 3 tiers, and with this is just for the school to be able to identify students. And it is the school's responsibility to identify them, any student who may be at risk, and start providing some supports to kind of help them out and see if they get to tier 3, then the school has sufficient data to support them initiating or requesting an evaluation and proposing that to the parent. It is important to know that every tier, it should be communicated with the parent so that we know as well that our child is needing some supports. Now, because of the RTI, it does not mean that we have to go through this. The schools, they will be doing this anyway, but it's not going to necessarily be a factor that the child has to go through the entire tier 1, 2, and 3 in order for an evaluation to be requested. The evaluation itself is an FIE, a full individual evaluation, and it can be requested from different people. It could be requested from the parent. It could be requested or suggested from a physician who's seeing your child. It could also be from the school. But the important thing to keep in mind is that we want to make sure that it is going to be requested in writing. We want the request to happen in writing. And when you do that, that's when the 45 school days start. Once you give that consent and you sign. Parents have to sign consent in order for their child to be evaluated. And it is a process that is going to be a team effort. It is a school psychologist, a licensed specialist in school psychology who will be in charge of the reporting and the evaluation itself. But it also includes related services, speech therapy, occupational therapy, visual impairment, specialists, anybody that is going to be part of that evaluation, to include the parent, to include any physician reports that need to be addressed and considered as well. These are some of the areas that will be evaluated, which are listed, and don't worry, you will be receiving a copy of the presentation. So don't worry about that. Just know that it is a 45 school day process. It's not counting days, holidays, weekends. It's not counting half days or a staff development days. So 45 school days where this child is attending school so that we may have them available to evaluate. Now, after this consent has been signed, the 45 school days have passed, your child has been evaluated, then we go into the eligibility criteria. And when we talk about eligibility criteria, we now know that there's 13 of them here in Texas. And we may worry that if we don't see our child's diagnosis in there, that it might be, well, how is my child going to qualify? But don't worry, that is the whole reason why the FIE is in place. And they will be providing you the report of the evaluation. They have 30 days. Now, these are calendar days to be able to meet with the ARD committee now and express what those results are. We do encourage parents to read that evaluation before you go to the ARD meeting so that you're aware of what those results are. And it's, part of it is for us to be able to kind of have our privacy and that emotional part that could possibly be, finding out that your child meets criteria for something that you didn't have in mind. But most of it is so that you can kind of look at it, have your emotional state and when you're receiving that, but also to kind of make notes. And if you have questions, if you need clarifications, so that you can process that information, because it is a lot of information. It will have all of the strengths and all of the weaknesses in every area that you decided to test your child. And with that in mind, it will give you a lot of information compared if the evaluation was formal, because it can be formal and informal. Formal would be comparing your child to other children the same age who do not have a disability, so that you're able to see the difference and where those gaps are and how we can kind of service and accommodate so that your child can start closing those gaps and move forward with their education. So when we talk about this, I want to make sure that everybody knows that it is not a diagnosis. So if your child doesn't have a diagnosis, you have never taken him to the doctor, and the school lets you know that they've done the evaluation and your child qualifies for autism or your child qualifies for an intellectual disability, they are meeting a Texas Education Agency criteria, not a medical diagnosis. These are only under the IDEA that we mentioned earlier, and that is an educational criteria, meaning that if you got tested in Northside and moved to SAISD or Northeast, the criteria again would now be evaluated again because it's not a medical diagnosis. So know that those are two different parts. Something else that I would like to mention is, let's say that your child may have Down syndrome. And if your child has Down syndrome, and your child has received services and you've worked with your child, very well, and he knows how to read and he knows how to write and he knows how to talk, then because there is a medical diagnosis, it does not necessarily say, or he's not entitled to receive special education services if there's not a need. There has to be an educational need. So it's important to know that if our child is receiving and received a medical diagnosis of ADHD and is currently taking medications, then when he takes his medications and attends school and he's focused and he's on track just like everybody else, and we're not seeing perfect, school still will give some leniency and reminders and things like that, just like they constantly do, then your child doesn't receive and shouldn't receive special education services because there's not an educational need. However, if with that in mind, your child is still struggling and they're not making the progress that they're intended to be making in their grade level, then that's when we would say, based on that evaluation, there are some medical diagnosis and there's also an educational need. And these are some of the circumstances, and examples of where we see this, then that's when we can say, yes, let's go ahead and qualify him. And it would probably be under the other health impairment because of the medical diagnosis that would require a physician report. So an OHI form for that criteria. Now, something that I want to make a huge note is that if your child does not qualify for special education because of the ADHD or any medical reasons, the medical diagnosis is there, but they are not having or needing more than that support. This is a Section 504. It's the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. And this is something that you can pursue. This is not a special education service. This is a general education service. And what it is just making your child, being able to access a specific support. So if we are using that ADHD example of that child with ADHD, maybe he's taking medications and he needs to access the nurse, 2 or 3 times a day to be able to take that medication. Maybe your child has asthma and needs to be using an inhaler and, accessing the nurse, or perhaps there's, something temporary, there was an injury and your child is now needing to take the STAR test and he has a broken arm. So these are some things that can be accessed and pursued, but they're not part of the special education process. This is something completely different. I just want to make sure that people know that it is an option if your child does not meet criteria under IDEA. The other part that I would like to mention before we move forward is that the eligibility, if your child does not meet criteria for any of these areas within the school setting, and then parents have the right to request an outside evaluation, which would be consist of the same areas. Only the tested areas are going to be the ones that you qualify for testing outside. It is at public expense, so the school would be providing a list of IEE providers for you to be able to take your child to get an evaluation outside of the school campus and district. So we get to the admission review and dismissal meeting. And this is now, when we've gotten to this point, it means that we are now happy with the evaluation. We know what we're in agreement. It reflects our children's needs. It reflects our children's strengths. We've gotten, whether we got it through the school or campus district, or we got it an outside evaluation, we're meeting with the committee and we are now discussing that we are in agreement. Now, who needs to be there is the parents. You are the most important person in your child's meeting. You are the person who is the expert of your child. And the general education teacher, although your child may be in a contained classroom, but she is also, or he is also very important for them I like to kind of make a note and say, look at your general education teacher as your inclusion key. If that person is in your art and is actively participating, she's getting to know your child, she's getting to know your student, and she is going to be more, she's going to have more tools to be able to have him in her classroom. The special education teacher is going to be the case manager, the person who is in charge of that IEP, of providing you with reports and progress and questions, and is going to be the one, majority of the time is the person giving the direct service. It may not be at all times, but it is the person in charge of the IEP. The administrator, we want the administrator to be aware of all the needs that are happening, and they are there. Part of it is for budget reasons and financial reasons, but they want to make sure that everybody is collaborating and making sure that the child's needs are being met. Assessment will be there only when there is that first evaluation report that needs to be interpreted for the committee, or if there is a triennial every 3 years when you're asked if you would like another evaluation. If there is that part, then that's when we have the LSSP, the licensed specialist in school psychology, present. And related services, any speech therapy, OT, PT, anybody in addition that is part of the committee, that is working with your child, would be also present at that time. The ARD meetings will be held once a year, annually, and it not necessarily means every school year, it's a calendar year. But if you have concerns, if there is something else that is concerning, or you just want to know progress, if there is something that you would like to request, another evaluation, if you would like to request to know and to review data, or if you would like to share concerns with the committee of a new diagnosis or something that's going on, parents have the right to request other meetings at any time. Know that if virtual learning is not working right now, call an ARD meeting, let them know what's working, let them know what's not working, so that they can kind of help and process, and do a little bit of troubleshooting at what they can do. It is important to collaborate and let them know, what are those things that are working, and what are things that need to be considered, so that the committee can give us a little bit of more options on what to do. We get to the IEP, and the IEP itself is the legal document. This is what is going to be the most important part of the actual plan. This is where everybody wants to get to, because this is now the legal document that we're going to work on. It has all of the academics, behavioral, functional, adaptive goals. We're going to work on this. And what I like to highlight is that we have the IEP. We'll start with PLAFs, the present levels of academic achievement and functional performance. The PLAFs is what is going to guide the entire document. So we want these PLAFs to be very detailed. We want to know every area that is in reading, math, science, social studies, even electives. How is our child doing? What are all those strengths in each classroom that our child is performing and that are at grade level? And then at the same time, we also want to see, what are all those weaknesses? What is it that my child should be doing and should be expected to be doing by grade and compared to same age peers, and he is unable because he's struggling? So when we identify that weakness in each area, then that's when we decide to look at those critical areas and make them annual goals. So if we may have a reading goal, or a couple of reading goals, a couple of math goals, it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to have a goal in every area. Maybe we are, science and social studies, we're not struggling there, or there's not a behavior goal. So it's important to know and for everyone to be aware that the present levels is what's going to guide that IEP. There could be behavior goals, there could be functional goals, adaptive goals. Remember, think about what we just mentioned. We are thinking of our child being able to be successful education-wise, and also employment-wise and, further education. We want to think about that education, that independent living. If I know my son is going to take a longer time, to be able to communicate or to be able to access, the restroom independently, yes, that is a life goal. So I'm going to start treating it now. I want some of these things to start happening now so that by the end of 18 years graduation, he's successful in all these areas. It'll also contain accommodations, and those accommodations can look very, very different for everyone. Remember that it is individualized education plan and program just for that one child. So not because we have 2 or 3 kids that have autism, they're going to have the same accommodations. It's going to be what's geared and what's tailored to that one specific student. We will also have modifications. If there is a modification need to the curriculum, that means that the curriculum is not on grade level and we're modifying it to be able to close that gap for our student. And with that, in mind, we want to make sure that people know that accommodations and modifications are different. Accommodations, we're going to accommodate the environment, like extended time or gaining the students' attention before giving them instructions, that they're not modifying the curriculum. It's just accommodating. We're repeating our instructions. We're giving positive praise. We're doing a lot of accommodating the students so that they are able to focus and learn and pay attention. Modifying would be, lowering down the curriculum expectations from their grade level to wherever they're at, so that they, maybe it's a prerequisite skill that we have to kind of focus on to close that gap and move further. It will also contain district and statewide assessments. So some of those districts and statewide assessments, when we decide what the student, depending by district, what they're taking and what are those benchmarks by their grade level, we talk about what accommodations they need. Are they able to take these tests in a whole group? Do we need to make them small group? Do we need to make them individualized to just one-on-one because they need a lot of support? Do we need to stretch it out and have breaks throughout those testing times? So usually most of the accommodations that we have in the IEP throughout the day, because that's what shows us that this is what makes my student successful, are going to be carried on into district and statewide assessments. It'll also talk about transition services when it's appropriate, when our child is already of age to transition. And with that, I know that there's another training that will be given specifically on that, but it really starts, by age 13. We want our child to start thinking of what they want to do when they're older and how we're going to start tracking it from now. What are those things that they want to kind of pursue and see as important for them, and look at, can we start putting goals? How do we get to that? So thinking, what's our end goal, and working backwards from that. What can we do now? Specific areas and supplements, depending on our child's disabilities. There are lots of supplements. We have, asthma supplement. We have a behavior intervention plan, which is a supplement. We have personal care services, that's a supplement. Even transportation is a supplement. So anything additional, that is, the autism supplement, that when there is a supplement, it's part of the IEP, it's already embedded in there, but then we are going to pull it out and we're going to be very specific about it. We're going to give detailed explanation and data to support exactly what service it is and how we're going to be using it, and how everybody in the team is going to be able to talk about and follow it, so that everybody has and everybody's on the same page pretty much. And then we go into those deliberations and kind of documenting, we do deliberations or prior written notice, and it's things that are being offered and discussed and why it's being accepted within the art committee, and some things why they're not. So it's important to have that documentation and be able to kind of summarize. So as we have these IEP meetings, and they're lengthy and sometimes they're emotional. We want to make sure that when we read that, we're able to kind of see what went on, what were we doing? We were opening testing, we were finalizing testing, we were, modifying goals. Was it an annual or not? All of these things are going to be very successful and useful for us as parents to be able to take that data and know where we're at. So one thing that I want to mention is that those goals that we talk about, they're annual goals. And by annual, I mean calendar. So if we are having a goal today for February 25th, 2021, it's going to go all the way to February 24th of 2022. So it may be half of the second grade year of your child and then third grade year. So sometimes parents get confused with, am I going to have a goal, an IEP meeting right before the school starts, because how is the new teacher going to know what my child is working on and how is it going to apply for the next grade level? This is going to be not needed. They are able to access your child's IEP, review it, and kind of see and carry over what that goal was established and kind of keep working on it. But if you feel comfortable and you want to call an ARD meeting just to review and kind of make sure that everybody's on the same page, ask questions of whether those strategies are going to be used and if there's anything different that they would like to add, you can also do that as well. So it's important for parents to do their homework. We want, and we go into those IEP meetings knowing that, there's a lot of things that are going on, but as parents, and like I mentioned with Heather, she was mentioning that too, right now that we're doing this virtual learning, we're seeing a lot of those services being implemented. So we are also part of that team. Know that as the IEP is being put together, it is a working document and everybody that is there to support it. It's there to make sure that everybody's doing their own part to provide information on your child, to provide strategies, to provide services, and you are, your child's best advocate. So if you have questions, please ask. Don't feel that you are not able to ask questions. If it doesn't make sense, don't be shy. Make sure that you're asking, what does that look like? So if my son was here, if it was me, how would you present that to me? Because in your mind, you can kind of make sense and say, oh, well, I can see that would work for him. Or you can say, no, that's not going to work. So give me an example and it'll give you an opportunity to troubleshoot and give ideas. And at the same time, it'll also give you an idea of how those things are being presented to your child so that when your child is at home, you can support the goal with practice as well. And you can also test your child to see how that skill is going. Because some of the things that we also see is that once the child is receiving the service in school, they're able to meet that goal. And then there's a different challenge when we're trying to generalize it. So if your child is working in both settings and they're doing it at school and they're also doing it at home, then it's a little bit easier for them to generalize that goal and learn and to use it in different settings. So from this IEP meeting, or ARD meeting that we mentioned, from having the administrator, the general education teacher, special education teacher, the parent, and any related service, the only two people that are voting members is the parent and the administrator. So everybody there, everybody else, we are there, and myself as an advocate, we're there to provide information and to support the team in creating it. But at the end of the day, the only two people that get to vote for agreeing or disagreeing with that plan is going to be the administrator and the parent. So that is why it's so important that parents are there to voice their concerns. They're there to, take data, ask for data, and make sure that you're there actively participating. With that being said, actively participating means that you also have access to the documentation that they're reviewing. So if you need, show me some work samples, show me the evaluation report before the meeting, show me things that are going to help me be an active participant of my child's IEP. I need the same resources and the same information that you get to review. So don't be shy, ask for those things to be shared with you so that you're able to learn and know how to take data as well. So after that, after you agree and you're happy with the plan, it reflects your child's goals, it reflects strengths, weaknesses, and your child as a whole, not just the areas of disability. Then you sign your IEP that you agree. You do have a choice to wait 5 days in order to sign, and then review it and kind of come back to the meeting and let them know that you agree. Or if you want to waive your 5 days, they would go ahead and implement them as soon as you sign. Now, if you're not in agreement with that IEP and you disagree with something, then what it's called, we table the meeting, we stop, we pause, and we reconvene within 10 days. We want to make sure that you have time to take a break, you do your research, school has time to see what other things they have to offer for that disagreement portion, and then we come back and kind of discuss again. But if we have gotten to the point where we've agreed and we're good, then the entire IEP is complete. However, the work doesn't stop there. That's when the best thing happens. Your child starts receiving services and you get to start monitoring. Monitoring and taking data is an ongoing thing. We want to make sure that that data collection is there in order to see how this progress is happening. So one of the big things to do is to be on the lookout for that Iep Progress Report. So every time your child is getting a report card from his general education teacher, just like everybody else, and your child is now on an IEP, then the Iep Progress Report should come with it too. Learn how to read them, ask questions. We are always asking, can we get details in the comments? Can you tell me if my child is working on washing his hands or reading on grade level? Can you tell me and give me information and examples of what that looks like? What's the percentage of the goal? But also give me some feedback if they're able to provide us with detailed information, then it's easier for us to see that they are making that progress. Data collection can look very different, and it's important for us to not just expect a report in writing, but if there's constant emails, going to the parents saying, hey, your child is doing this, whether it's behavioral or positive or negative, it's, data is data. We want it, we want the good and we want the bad. We know our children, we want to make sure that we're able to support them. So emails that are being sent to you, texts that are being sent to you, ongoing communication from the teachers, document it, take a note, take a picture, email. If you're having a conversation with a teacher, when you're dropping off your child and they're mentioning that there's a concern, go back and email them and saying, okay, now that you mentioned, now that, I'm not busy and I have my total attention on this, what's going on, what happened? Because all of these things that are being collected as data can show that there's a need for another support. There's a need for additional services, or there's a need for increasing time with a specific support, whether it's an in-classroom support or a behavior specialist or any of that. And when we go back into the IEP meeting, we have something to show that it's not just mom wanting more services. It's not just me wanting to ask for something different or, complaining about something. It's, I'm getting these emails, I'm getting these texts, I'm getting this, feedback throughout the school day. And this is the data to support why there's a specific, area of need for support, whether it's another evaluation to be conducted, or if it's a specific timing that we need to add. So it's important for us to be able to take data in different ways. A picture, if there's something that you see on your child's daily work or something that comes home, take a picture if there's something that catches your attention and you want to address it. So other than that, we want to make sure that you are voicing your concerns, you're emailing, you're documenting, and that you're reaching out to the proper, channels and letting them know, hey, this is what's going on. What do I do now? I need some support. Let's have an ARD meeting and let's have those conversations, because the conversations that happen inside of the IEP or ARD meeting are legal, they're documented, and there has to be a response. It's not just let us know what's not working and they leave it as it is. Schools have that responsibility to address any concern and figure out with you, what can we do to support the child, so that we can see a child that's receiving special education services and making progress and reaching those goals. And if they're reaching those goals, sometimes we see that they're mastering these goals sooner than what we expected. So then that means that we can meet earlier and make sure that these goals become a little bit more challenging, and that they're better, and that we don't have to wait until the end of the school year or the end of the IEP year in order for us to meet prior to change them. So it is an art committee decision, to kind of work on it. And like we said, it's a work in progress. Anything that needs to be tweaked or changed can be done so in an art meeting. So with that said, we, as Brighton Center, we want to make sure that that we are available for supports through distance learning. Right now, we are attending pre-art meetings and art meetings via Zoom, but we want to make sure that I wanted to kind of rush a little bit and get to questions in the event that you need anything. Let us know, reach out to us. And Mrs. Heather, if you want to let me know if there's any questions that came up. I know that it'll be recorded and kind of put out, but if there's anybody that has questions now, I'm good to answer.
Okay, awesome. So the first question is from an attendee that said, I have a parent with concerns regarding student progress. One parent wants the student to be assessed, but the other parent fears the student being labeled and stigmatized if the student qualifies for services. What recommendations do you have for someone in this situation, since the student's success is the main goal?
If we're talking, and I'm assuming that it is the same student, like it's a married couple.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like.
It sounds like that. So if your child is already receiving special education services, there is a progress report that comes from the general education teacher, and then there's a progress report that comes from the special education teacher. So it gets confusing just because they're both called the same thing. However, the progress report from the IEP will just be progress on the goals that the parents decided to agree on from the IEP. So it's just going to have progress on the reading from the goal, not on reading as a whole. So the general education will be grades. It'll have grades, or it'll have the S, N, E, depending of the grade level of your child. So we want to make sure that if it is a child who has already been identified under special education, you can always go back into an ARD meeting and have the conversations of what is the progress that is being documented and shared with me. Is it accurate? Show me where he is or where she is so that I can understand. And if it is not sufficient, if this progress is not happening, then that opens up the door for us to either tweak the strategies of how this goal is being addressed. If it's not working, we're not going to want to continue working for the rest of the year if there's no progress. We can change it, and not change the goal specifically. It's changing how we teach it, how we access, those interventions. Maybe he's going, let's just say it's a speech goal, and, he's not making or identifying sounds or producing sounds. Then maybe it's the time. Maybe we're just seeing this child two times for 15 minutes. Maybe we need to see him 3 times for 15 minutes or 3 times for 30 minutes. So it'll give us a little bit of information on how we can address it and if we need to change it. If it is a child who has not yet been identified under special education, and we see that the progress is not there, then that's when we go back to that RTI, the tier interventions. And the tier interventions, if we go back to the tiers, that it's for that main purpose. Everybody starts at a tier 1. Everybody is receiving the same kind of instruction. We move to tier 2, and this is the school letting you know, we're moving your child to tier 2. He needs a little bit more help than the rest of the students. And this is still through general education. We have not even started special education. Tier 2 is just going to be the child receiving services within the same classroom when the instruction has already been given. There's a small group, table that they usually have, and they kind of rotate the kids so that nobody's identified and privacy is not shared among the students, as they are very smart to kind of pick up on that. And they just receive extra, maybe they just needed the instructions repeated, or maybe they were visual learners that they needed to see an example before they were able to create their own. And that can be sometimes just something that they learn, and then eventually they're okay. If they start making progress and they stay there on tier 2. And it may just be for reading and not for math, or it may be across the board, we don't know. But if your child doesn't make progress within a couple of, less than a grading period, and the child gets moved to tier 3, now we're looking at a very specific intervention. We tried the regular classroom and it wasn't sufficient. There was no progress being made. We tried the small group and there was no progress being made. Now we're getting your child to work one-on-one with a reading specialist or a math specialist, or even another teacher from another classroom for a different, teaching techniques. And now we see that, it's very specific. So anytime, and as an advocate, anytime that we see that there's a struggle and there's a child that's already being receiving the RTI, it's in the RTI process, we want to monitor that closely. We want to make sure that we're monitoring within a month or 2 at the max. Is it sufficient? Is my child making progress? Because if it's not the case, then that's when we make the recommendation to have your child tested. I know that there's a fear for parents that my child will be labeled, but like we mentioned, it is not a medical diagnosis. It is an educational criteria. And the label is not specifically, a label. It's a label to receive services. However, if you move districts, then the label pretty much stays on that district, and you would have to pursue that evaluation again in a different district. But it's just very important to know that if your child is in the RTI process, you need to be very active to questions and documenting with the staff and with your teacher to say, okay, what's the area, what's being targeted, and how can I help? Maybe we can help at home with reading extra minutes, or helping with math, helping with manipulatives. There's we have different kinds of learners, and one teaching style doesn't work for everybody. So maybe it was just that my child was more of a tactile learner, and we needed to implement more manipulatives into that teaching. But if it's not, then a good idea is to consider having an evaluation. If the child doesn't meet criteria in the evaluation, then now it's not a disability. It's not, something that is across the board. It's just temporary, or it was just in this specific concept. And it gives us a lot more, data to kind of review and see is my child needing supports in all areas. And if he's doing great in all the other areas, then we know it's not something to have that big concern. But if we want to make sure that we identify them as soon as possible, because if there is, then they would benefit from receiving those services. The earlier, the better.
Yeah, I appreciate that you clarified the whole tier process. I've had families ask before or not understand why you're having to go through all these tiers, but now it makes sense that if you can implement, some supports that prevent the child from having to go into, full-fledged special ed, that why not go that route? So that really makes a lot of sense.
Yes, and one of the things that I would like to mention as well is that, teachers are trying to do different things. Everybody's a different learner, and they have a lot of different, teaching styles and different kids who learn differently. So it gives them the opportunity to provide parents with data to say, it's not the teacher being lazy. It's not that it was just one way teaches all and that's it. It pretty much gives them that opportunity to say, well, we've tried all of this, it didn't work. We've tried all of this and that didn't work. So these are all the, they take data to support. These are all the different teaching strategies and teaching styles that we've tried, and we don't see your child making the progress that's expected to meet his grade level expectations. So now we're concerned, and parents, we are always very fearful of discrimination. You know, if my child, why does my child want to get, you know, why are they recommending evaluation for my child? So with this, it gives the teachers that opportunity and the campus that opportunity to say, we've tried it, you know, we've tried all of this, and now we're recommending evaluation for your child. But at the same time, sometimes it could be the other way around. Teachers want to have that opportunity and parents just want to test. Parents are like, I don't want to wait the whole tier 3 process. I just want to test my child now. I see the struggles. I see the behaviors. We have a lot of kiddos who have anxiety that are really good in school, but when they come home, they melt down and they just can't keep, you know, their emotions, and they can't self-regulate. So sometimes teachers are not able to see that. So just something to keep in mind is it doesn't have to happen. It's not either or. Both of the evaluation and the RTI interventions can happen simultaneously. So teachers can continue doing their RTI and the evaluation can take place as soon as a parent requests it, and then they can both be used at the same time.
Awesome. Okay, next question. If a student that has a one-on-one at one school and goes to another school and they don't want to give the student the one-on-one in the new school, what can be done? What are your recommendations?
So it's important to know if it's the same school district. Usually, if it's the same school district, they will honor the same IEP from one school to another. If it's in the same school district, and they should provide the one-on-one without a problem. If it's not the same school district, and that's when we go back to, it's not a medical diagnosis, it's an educational criteria. So they are going to want to evaluate to see if, does this child continue to need that support? Because they're going to want to see, well, we have more staff. Maybe there was an additional aide. Maybe there's, 3 aides in one classroom, and where he was, there was only 2. So, and the dynamics of the classroom have changed. Maybe there's kiddos who are more, independent, and they don't need more hands-on, and they may not need that one-on-one support. And, the ratios are maybe different. So it'll take you back to that evaluation and to have that data to support whether the student continues to need that one-on-one based on the evaluation. If you have, if you're already there and they are saying, well, we don't need it, the data shows that we don't need it, then it's important for us to have documentation to say why, why do we need it? It's important to always take data, to always say, is it, the one-on-one, is he or she there for academic purposes? Is the one-on-one given because of medical reasons? We have kiddos who are medically fragile who may have a one-on-one because of their risk of falling or seizures. Then that has nothing to do with the academic. It's just a person designed to pretty much keep him safe or keep her safe. So documentation is your key. Why does the child need a one-on-one? Throughout the day, are you able to target all the things that if that one-on-one was removed, would your child be able to be successful? So one thing that I can mention with documentation is that data works both ways. You receive and you keep data to be able to receive services, but you can also have data to remove services. So one thing that you can do would be show me the data that says that my child is successful without the one-on-one. And I can tell you from my personal experience, my son with autism had elopement behaviors, and he is a really fast runner and he loves running. So one of the things was, we may kind of think about the one-on-one is needed. Yes. Why? If I'm using my son as an example, well, he may need a one-on-one when he's transitioning. When he's going from one classroom to another, he has to have a one-on-one, but maybe he doesn't need it inside of the classroom. Maybe, he's able to be managed with other IAs and with a teacher and he's fine. But for transition purposes, he is going to need one person for himself. So we can use that data as well to say, well, for these specific, areas, it has to be given. For these, unstructured times, it has to happen. For these, more structured, contained inside the classroom, then he may not. So the data will show what times of the day, what parts of the day is it there for academic purposes to teach, or is it for safety reasons? What's the reason why we've determined that this one-on-one is needed? So also ask for where's the data to support that it's not needed anymore. Show me the data where you have more staff available, where your dynamics from the actual classroom shows us that this one-on-one is not needed anymore. So just the way that it'll give us services, it'll also help us, if they need to remove something, for us to ask, well, then show me how it's different, so that I'm comfortable knowing that my son is safe, or that my son is still learning without the supports that this one-on-one was supposed to be providing.
Yeah, I love saying, I love that you saying that it goes both ways.
Mm-hmm.
You ask for their data. So
yes,
awesome.
Yes.
So this kind of might be in the same realm of needing data, but there's a student this was a parent who submitted a question before the session, and her daughter is aging out of an 18+ program. However, there hasn't been the transition that needed to happen to community. And is it out of the realm of possibility that she could continue services with the school district, even though she would be aged out of programming, special education? What could a family do in that instance?
So the aging out happens until they turn 21, but for the end of that school year,
Mm-hmm.
the child could still receive services, through the high school, after, if they fail to provide appropriate transition services, what does the data say? My child, what's going on? What is the day going to look like? Because we want their graduation day to look like their first day of adulthood. We want them to, okay, you're ready. We are trying to make sure that during middle school, we have goals in place to kind of have them think about, look at skills that they can practice, that they enjoy and that they're good at. And then in high school, we have them practice those things out in the community. So we should have these things happening before they graduate. But if they didn't make it to practice and to, have a job coach and all these things, that's still a possibility. You can still reach out to your school district and let them know that, your child has not completely aged out. He may be out of school, but your child has not completely aged out and is still in need of services. There are transition specialists within the school districts that are probably the best person to reach out to. Region 20 also has a great staff that are transition services and that are able to give you supports. But your district is still the one responsible for providing that transition until your child turns 22.
Got it. Well, now, what if that individual then turned 22 and due to the pandemic, they didn't get those transition services because of the shutdown? What is there a possibility of it extending past age 22?
I think that that's a really good question. I think that unfortunately, TEA has not given, school districts guidance in order to address that, but there are addressing them on case by case or district, sometimes they're giving and allowing the campus to make those decisions on their own because of the lack of guidance. So they're able to provide compensatory services. And those compensatory services are going to be based off of what would your child have received, during this pandemic and that your child did not receive, and what progress should that child or that student have, what was the expectation that they would have met if they were still present in person. Then looking at that as your documentation and your data to support that there are services owed. And I can tell you that, it's not a yes and no question or a black and white. I think it's going to be more of how that's addressed and how the data is showed and prepared for that art committee to decide that we're going to provide compensatory services for those transition times that they did not get. I believe, as a parent, that you are your child's best advocate. And if you feel that this is a link that's missing in order for them to be able to meet that, connection with the community and that connection with what adulthood and what we had been planning and working on for all these years, from elementary to middle school to high school, to be able for him to be successful, we go back to what the law says. What does the law say? It was designed, to meet that unique need for education, employment, and independent living, and we failed. So providing that, because of the pandemic, we're not blaming the school district, we're blaming the pandemic and saying we didn't get to make that connection with independent living. So let's go back and provide some support so that at least you get us started in that path.
Okay, awesome. I think that's all of our questions for now, but Girasol, can you just remind folks one more time how they can get in touch with you? Again, we're going to send out the link to this this webinar, also the PowerPoint, but I want folks to know again how to get in touch with you, what types of supports you offer in terms of hard support and training.
Yes, definitely. We are, here is our contact information, and you'll receive it by email. But Brighton Center, Special Education Support Services, we are the SES program, and our SES program at brightonsa.org is our email. You can call the 826-449 number, or you can just look at our website at brightonsa.org. But what we want to be able to provide to the community is pre-ards. If you have any questions, if you just need clarification to better understand your child's paperwork, if you are just concerned on one area or another, and you just want to have a conversation and look at, this is what my concerns are, how can I address them, or confirm that I am addressing them correctly. A lot of parents reach out and say, I just want you to look at it, and is it okay? This is what I'm concerned about. And are those services documented appropriately? Because we do have to learn a whole new language when we talk about special education. And yes, we can do that. We can meet over the phone. We can meet via Zoom at this point. We are doing a lot of Zoom meetings, pre-ards with families. And then we kind of allow the parent and give them an action plan to decide, what do you want to do? Would you like, these are some of the recommendations in order to get those concerns addressed. Would you like to do them on your own? We want you to be able to advocate for your child. Or would you like me to attend the ARD meeting with you? That's also an option. So some parents are comfortable doing one or the other. There's no right or wrong. We're going to support our parents and families individually as well, and let them know that if I just need to be there for emotional support, or I need to be there to kind of help you find your voice through that process, or if you just need the guidance and you want to do it on your own, we're good with either or. And then as well as having some classes. We do have classes and collaborations with different agencies, but we also have some on our website that you're more than, they're welcome. Everybody can see them. There's some Zooms that we've done and pre-recorded ones, but there are also some that you can register for a specific topic that they have a highly interest in. And we are just here to make sure that every child and every parent gets a voice to address their concerns and get the best education that they possibly can.
Well, the SESS program, that's a huge go-to for our staff. We send our families your way all the time. You do amazing work, and we really appreciate what you do for families. I appreciate you coming on with us, Girasol, today. I know we had to reschedule this session because of our lovely snowpocalypse from last week, but yes. I appreciate you jumping on with us. And just a reminder that we will send this video link to all the attendees today and those that couldn't attend. The PowerPoint as well. Girasol is sharing that with the families, with families. And we're going to be sending an email, a survey, just to get your feedback, see if there's any other topics that you'd be interested in hearing about. Our next session will be March 26th, and that session will be on parent advocacy with Sylvia Farber. So hopefully you can join us for our next session. Again, we just want to thank the Harvey E. Najam Charitable Foundation, the Mays Foundation, for making these webinars possible. And we just thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having us. Take care.
You too. Thank you, Girasol.